They say a house is built of bricks and beams, but a home is made of hope and love. For 3 years, I truly believed I had both. When my husband David passed away in that tragic construction accident, my world didn't just crack. It shattered into a million sharp pieces. He was my anchor, my protector, and the love of my life. In the quiet, suffocating aftermath of his loss, I clung to the only piece of him I had left, his family. I foolishly believed that our shared grief would bind us together. I thought his mother, Margaret, would look at me and see the woman her son loved. But death has a strange way of stripping away masks, exposing the cold, hard truth underneath. It happened on a rainy Sunday evening, exactly 6 months after David's funeral. Margaret had called a mandatory family meeting at her large, pristine suburban home. When I arrived, the atmosphere in the living room was heavy, almost clinical. David's siblings, Sarah and Michael, were already seated, staring intently at their laps. No one looked up to greet me. No one offered a comforting smile. I took a seat on the edge of the sofa, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Margaret stood by the fireplace, holding a stack of neat white envelopes. Her posture was rigid, her expression completely devoid of warmth. She didn't offer me tea. She didn't ask how I was coping with the grief that was still swallowing me whole. Instead, she cleared her throat, a sound that cut through the silence like a knife. "Thank you all for coming," Margaret began, her voice steady and chillingly formal. "As you know, David's passing has changed the dynamic of this family. We need to look forward, protect our legacy, and heal. And to heal, we must make difficult decisions." She turned her cold, gray eyes directly onto me. "Alina, you are a part of this family because of David. But now that he is gone, your presence is a constant, painful reminder of what we lost. It is time for us to close this chapter." I sat frozen, the breath completely trapped in my throat. "Margaret, what are you saying?" I whispered, my voice trembling. She didn't blink. "I am proposing a formal vote to permanently exclude you from all future family events, gatherings, and properties. We need space to move on, without outsiders." She then handed an envelope and a small slip of paper to Sarah, then to Michael, and finally to her brother who sat in the corner. It was a structured, cruel, and calculated ambush. They were voting on my worth. They were voting to erase me. I watched in absolute, paralyzed horror as the people I had spent holidays with, the people I had cooked for and cried with, silently checked their boxes. When Margaret collected the papers, she looked at them, then looked back at me with a smirk of absolute triumph. "The vote is unanimous, Alina. It's time for you to leave." Walking out of that house, the rain soaked through my clothes, but I couldn't feel the cold. I was completely numb. The betrayal didn't just hurt. It tore at the very fabric of my identity. I had lost my husband, and now, with the twist of a pen, I had lost the only family I had left in this city. For weeks, I stayed locked inside my small apartment. The silence was deafening. Every corner of the room reminded me of David, and every thought reminded me of the cruel, calculated look on Margaret's face. I was broken, drowning in a sea of sorrow and rejection. Why did they hate me so much? What had I done to deserve being cast out like garbage? But as the days bled into weeks, the tears slowly began to dry, replaced by a quiet, burning realization. Margaret hadn't excluded me just because of grief. It was too organized, too aggressive. There was a desperate urgency in the way she wanted me gone. That was when I decided to go through David's old study. It was a painful process, opening boxes of his notes, his old blueprints, and his personal laptop. I was looking for a connection to him, but instead, I found a digital folder hidden deep within his archived work files, labeled simply with a string of random numbers. When I opened it, my heart stopped. David was a meticulous structural engineer. He hadn't just died in a random construction accident. He had been investigating a major structural fraud. The company managing the collapsed site belonged to Margaret's brother, Michael's father-in-law, and Margaret herself was a primary silent investor. David had discovered that they were using substandard materials to skim millions from the budget. He had documented everything: the forged safety certificates, The secret bank accounts. The texts from Margaret telling him to drop it for the sake of the family. David's death wasn't just a tragedy. It was a consequence of his honesty. And Margaret knew. She knew that as David's legal widow, all his personal effects, his laptops, and his legal rights came to me. She didn't ban me because I was a painful reminder of David. She banned me because she was terrified I would find what he left behind. She wanted to isolate me, to break my spirit so completely that I would pack up, leave the city, and never look back. Sitting in the dim light of the computer screen, the pain of rejection melted away, replaced by an icy, unwavering strength. I was no longer the grieving, helpless widow they could push into the shadows. I was the keeper of David's truth. They thought they had voted me out of their lives, but they had actually just freed me from the chains of their hypocrisy. I knew exactly what I had to do. The opportunity came exactly 1 week after my banishment. It was Margaret's annual summer gala, a massive high society charity event hosted at a luxury hotel downtown. It was the crown jewel of her social standing, attended by city officials, investors, and the press. She thought she was safe, celebrating her wealth while I was mourning in the dark. I didn't sneak in. I walked right through the front doors, wearing a classic black dress, holding a sleek flash drive in my hand. When Margaret saw me walking across the ballroom, her face turned a pale, furious shade of white. She rushed over, her voice a harsh, venomous whisper. "How dare you show up here? You were voted out. Security will throw you into the street. You should look at the main screens, Margaret," I said softly, my voice completely calm, devoid of any anger. Before she could react, the grand promotional video playing on the massive projector screens behind the stage suddenly cut out. In its place, a crisp, clear document appeared. It was the safety audit David had compiled, detailing the fraud, followed by bank statements clearly showing Margaret's signatures on the illegal transfers. Then, David's voice from a memo he had saved through the high-end audio system of the ballroom. "If anything happens to me, the truth about the foundation fraud is right here." The ballroom fell into a deathly, suffocating silence. Hundreds of pairs of eyes turned from the screens directly to Margaret. The color completely drained from her face. She looked as though she had aged 20 years in a single second. Her brother tried to slip out the back door, but he was met by 3 police officers I had contacted earlier that afternoon. Handing over the physical copies of the evidence, Sarah and Michael stood frozen, watching their mother's empire crumble to dust in a matter of moments. Margaret reached out to me, her hands shaking, her voice cracking. "Alina, please, we are family."
I looked at her, feeling no hatred, no anger, only a profound sense of pity. "You voted me out, remember?" I said quietly. "You told me it was time to close the chapter." As the authorities escorted Margaret and her associates out of the gala, under the flashing lights of the press cameras, I walked out into the cool night air. The heavy weight that had rested on my chest since David's passing was finally gone. I hadn't just exposed a criminal web. I had restored the honor of the man I loved. True justice isn't about hurting those who hurt you. It is about standing unbowed in the light of the truth. They tried to banish me into the dark, but in doing so, they only forced me to find my own light. As I drove away from the chaos, leaving their shattered legacy behind, I finally found the one thing they could never take from me, my peace.